Ego death is not a thing. It's not. And I'm going to talk about why this is true, how I know it's true. I know it's not going to be the most popular thing to talk about because everybody and their brother talks about their experiences with ego death. And I am in no way dismissing other people's experiences, but I would like to maybe offer a different perspective about maybe what was happening with their experience and also why I know that ego death isn't a thing. So I've been on this journey of growth, change, healing, staying clean, all those kinds of things. For tomorrow will be 33 years. Today's the 25th, tomorrow's the 26th. So I got clean November 26th, 1992. And I was extremely fortunate that when I got clean, I stayed clean. I haven't felt the need to go back out and use drugs and alcohol or other substances. And I also left 12-step recovery several years ago. I have other videos that kind of go into that, so I won't go into that now. But I was in a coaching call, because I'm a coach, and I was doing some research and learning about certain aspects of this industry that I'm in. And one of the topics that came up, and there were a lot of people in these meetings, a lot of people, like the facilitators of these groups really know how to pull people in, and that's amazing. It's great. But I would say there were about 1,100 people at any given time. And I can't speak for any of them except myself. But from what I heard was, it's a commonly held belief, and I've been writing about this for years actually, so I've known it before I came into this call, but that ego death is a necessary part of spiritual growth and healing. And I want to say that that is not my experience at all. And I think the biggest reason for that is because, like a lot of us that end up committed to a life of deeper healing and growth, I experienced a lot of trauma as a kid. Because of that, I had sort of dissociated myself from myself. Ego, what is ego? Ego is literally means I in Latin, or the self. And so, like a lot of sexual abuse survivors and other kinds of traumas, I separated from myself to survive, to try to make sense out of the life that I was living. And, as a consequence of that, when I got older and I was ready to get clean and kind of change my trajectory in my life, I had to learn how to put that back together. And I realized I had a lot of spaces in my memory that just weren't there. And so when I eventually did find myself in therapy, I had like 11 years clean at that time. It was after my husband died, and it kind of brought up all that trauma and a lot of trauma responses. And so I decided to go into therapy. And what happened in therapy was I started to reassemble myself. And I started to learn who I am on the other side of trauma and grief. And one thing that I specifically learned was that I had a lot of really powerful survival mechanisms that lived inside my mind. And one of them is my ego. Now, the ego can be a pain in the ass, don't get me wrong. It can get people into a lot of trouble. It's gotten me into a lot of trouble. It tries to do it still. What I came to learn about what the ego is, since it's a part of who I am, it's a part of my identity, myself, my personality, is that it's more like a child than an enemy. It's like a little kid that for whatever reason, it has like a prominent voice inside our minds. It can speak like it's us. It can act like our higher selves, warning us or lashing out or whatever the ego is up to at that time, because it's like a little kid, and little kids don't like change. They want things to remain the same because it's safe. And so the ego is a child, not literally, but it's like a child that its only goal is to protect you, is to keep you safe. And so the idea of, clobbering it, killing it, getting rid of it, stamping it out, doesn't make sense to me. It's a part of myself that speaks in my very own voice, but isn't me. And so it's incumbent upon me to pay attention to what's going on inside my mind. And when my mind starts to tell me things that I know are patently untrue, because I've learned over the years how to be quiet and listen to my thinking or my thoughts and sort of challenge the veracity of the thoughts as they come up. So when my ego mind is telling me something that doesn't jibe with what I know is true, then it becomes incumbent on me to sort of override that, like I would actually do with one of my kids. My kids are all grown now, but when they were little, I wouldn't just say, oh, sure, eat that ice cream for dinner. You don't have to eat chicken. You don't have to eat broccoli. Just go ahead and have that chocolate ice cream. No problem. Of course, I wouldn't do that. And I don't do that with my own ego mind when it's telling me, whatever, flip the guy off out the window because he's wrong and I'm right, or, whatever it is. So I just pay close attention to what it's saying and whether or not, it's kid talking, the ego, or if it's my higher self. And, I have to say, it's not because I'm some spiritual giant or genius. It's because I've spent all these years learning how to dismantle thoughts that don't serve me and to undo those stories that keep me stuck in whatever I'm stuck in. Like if I'm stuck in victim, then there's a story there and I need to take a look at it and undo that and talk about that, because there were so many people sharing their experiences of their ego deaths. And I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding for people that do a lot of, self-help or growth, just in this field, and people who, they're tired of suffering. They're tired of always hurting and struggling. And so they're looking for ways to feel better without using drugs and alcohol or without checking out. And so then the ego becomes just another story, and I think it's like Alan Watts. If you know who Alan Watts is, he says that the ego is sort of like your beating heart. It would be like trying to control your beating heart or your breathing. Now we do breathing in yoga, and we do different kinds of healing breath work and things like that, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about autonomic system functions, like, when you go to bed, you still keep breathing and your heart still keeps beating. It's like telling yourself that you have control over those systems when it's just part of how things work, and our ego is that way. It's part of our mind. And while my problem here is that I don't want to say control, but I think that it is, control over the way we react to things, and we do have control over the thoughts that we believe or don't believe. And so that's a little bit different than actually the ego, that is just a part of like the amygdala of our brains, where our emotion centers are, which is basically what ego is about reactions and feelings all the time, right? So it's like saying that I can halt my amygdala while I decide not to have a feeling about something, and it's just another story, right? So it's a good idea to really learn the difference between the truth and a story. And the truth is that most of the time, just as human beings, we're in some kind of a story, like I'm a woman, I'm this or I'm that or whatever. There's always story there, right? And things can be disassembled and examined, but we have to know our limits as people, and we can't decide that we no longer care to breathe, or we want the blood to pump one direction in this arm and the other direction in that arm. It does not work like that. And so listening to people in this workshop talk about that, I was thinking, what is it that they are experiencing? They're experiencing something, and it's profound. I mean, it's really life-changing for a lot of people. And throughout my experience, I've had a lot of life-changing, like, awakenings. And so what I'm thinking is that they're having an awakening. They're just assigning the name ego death, or the title ego death, to that. But what I think is that there is some, not confusion, that's not the right word. There's some mix up, like, between ego and shadow. So we're thinking that ego is this darkness, and that we work on that darkness until it becomes transmuted into something else. And so now we've got shadow work that's not quite how it works. And we've got ego, and we're misunderstanding that it's really just like a little bratty kid, right? It acts like it's in control, but it's not. It acts like it's smarter than you, but it's not. It acts like it knows what to do next, absolutely, but it doesn't. And the shadow can present itself like the solution too, because it's a habit, whatever that looks like for you. Like, for me would be isolation, refusing to stay connected to people, because I won't go into why, who cares? But that's one of my shadows, right? And so there are similar ways of approaching the shadow and the ego that can look the same, and that honestly have the same effect. Like, you're working on it, and your ego tells you, look at how good this feels. And you're like, I had this wonderful experience, and I called out my ego, and I breathed, and I was close to God, and I was transformed. And your shadow will do the same thing. Like, you called so-and-so like you said you would, and you connected with her, and it's okay if now you turn on Netflix and watch 14 hours of Stranger Things. Talking from experience. So it can sound like you, and it can feel really good. So I just wanted to maybe shine a little light on both of those things, that ego and shadow, while they seem very similar sometimes, they are different. They're separate. They're different things. And so the approach is similar in some ways, but also it's different in some ways, because the shadow, sometimes my experience with my shadow work has been that when I take a deep dive with whatever the issue is, whatever shadow I'm working with, that it can be transformed, that it can be eliminated, if you will. It's like you're literally shining a floodlight right into that darkness with the truth, and it can truly be transformed, and in that way it can be dissolved. It's not something that you deal with anymore. It's healed, right? That's why, like, in my work I talk a lot about being healed, while a lot of other people that work in the same field talk about healing as if it goes on forever and ever. And that's also not my experience. Most things can be healed. So that's how shadow work kind of works in that way. Ego is different because it's an actual part of us. The shadow is almost like thoughts and thinking, which are ephemeral and fleeting, but ego is more like a part of your mind, and in order to kill the ego, which means I in Latin, that would mean that you have to actually kill yourself. Yourself. And that's not healing. And I sort of touched on the trauma and separating from myself and dissociating from who I was and what was happening to my body when I was being abused when I was little. The idea is not to do that again, dissociate again, re-traumatize myself again. It's meant to reintegrate that part of myself and to love that little part of myself that thinks it's so clever. It's not bad. It's not trying to harm me. It's trying to protect me. But it's the child, and it's my job as the adult to protect it, right? So I'm not trying to eliminate it or obliterate it or shine a floodlight on it or anything like that. My job is to gently redirect it or abruptly tell it, no, we're not doing that. That doesn't make sense. And it's okay to change. Change is fine. Change is welcome, right? So those were the things that I wanted to talk about. And I hope that people got through this entire thing, because I know that I kind of go back and forth and, you know, hopefully it was linear enough that it made sense. But I wanted to talk about that because in the healing community in general, and I'm generalizing because obviously it's not everybody, but it is really popular. I mean, people are taking DMT and different things to facilitate the death of their ego. And I know that it's what they really mean is transform and, you know, get closer to a higher power. And that's beautiful, but you don't have to kill parts of yourself to do that. And I really feel like it's my responsibility to tell people that you don't have to do that. And especially what if you're one of those people that goes into things wholeheartedly and you really believe that if you just do what that guru or that teacher tells you to do, your ego will die and you will be transformed, and you do all this work and then that doesn't happen and you don't experience that because, and I suspect that happens a lot. Like we have that really, oh, that felt so good feeling for an hour or a day or even a week or whatever. But eventually it just comes right back because you're not looking at the issue. You're making up a story about your ego that's, you know, it's more like entertainment than healing. And I want people to know, and I'm pissing off some people, but you know, it is what it is. You know, I'm willing to do that. I believe that healing is real, like being in a healed state. And I believe in integrating all the tender little parts of myself that I disowned, you know, for whatever reason. And I want that for people. And it doesn't have to be some long forever process, you know. In another video, I will talk about breath work and how some transformations, and a lot of them are physical healings, can happen in 30 minutes or an hour, and that's it. You don't have to be in these healing sessions for 6 months or 9 months. And I want people to know that. Save your money and save your time and save your frustration and discover that healing is real. So that's why I do what I do. And I just wanted to share this with you today. I have a commitment. I'm just going to say it so that I'll do it. My commitment is to do one video for YouTube, because I do them sometimes other places, in this format, because I have a podcast with my youngest son. And that's a whole thing that we basically just started it. But I have a commitment to do one video a day in this format for 30 days. So because I have procrastinated so bad, I have told myself the scariest stories about doing this. So the best way for me to get through something is to just do it. And so I'm just saying it so that you can hold me accountable. So also go ahead and like and subscribe this video if you got anything out of it. Please comment, let me know what you think about what I said, what your experience with your ego is, and whether you've had successful ego death. You know, I'm not saying that I'm the expert or that I'm right about everything. So, you know, if you have a different experience, please feel free to share that with me. And yeah, there's links in the bio for my website and blog and different things. So feel free to check those out. And I love you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Oops, I hit the wrong thing.